welcome back. So we are finally moving on to CSS, and I've been waiting for this moment for a long time, because once we move on to this topic, it opens up so many opportunities for us and our websites. Once we get this down, we'll be able to have pretty much unlimited opportunities when it comes to making our websites. And you can see when we begin our next website, it's really going to help. But alright, let's get started. So what is CSS? Now, if you have any experience with web development or even HTML, you may be familiar with it. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Don't worry about the name too much. But what you should take away from it is that CSS is a language that's used to give styling to websites. So I'm going to get more into the advantages of using CSS later, but why don't we just talk about the introduction first? So it's pretty much the standard language across all websites, and it's used in pretty much every single website across the globe. This includes Google, Facebook, Twitter, all of the big websites, and pretty much every website out there uses CSS. So one thing I'd like to do is give you a little bit of history behind CSS. So in the early days of the internet, when web pages were still very experimental and new, most people would simply use HTML4, which is an earlier version of HTML. And they would do things like change the images on click, and the design wouldn't be very good. If you search for any website from the 1990s, it will not look good. But after CSS was introduced, everything changed. Style was added, and websites looked more modern, and that's really how it shaped what websites look like today. So using CSS predominantly for styling has lots of advantages, and I'm going to go over those later in the course, but for now, let's just stick to this. So on top of that, it goes hand in hand with HTML, and they're used pretty commonly together. So if you downloaded the CSS pack, which is full of the PowerPoints and everything I'm using for this section of the lectures, well, if you downloaded that, you'll see an HTML file. And if you open that, inside a style tag, you're going to see, don't worry about the style tag, by the way. Don't worry about what it means. We're going to go over it later. But you can see that CSS and HTML go pretty hand in hand. So on top of that, let's go over some of the advantages. So right here on the right, I have something I want to show you. On the right of the picture, you can see that's what the BBC looks like without CSS. Pretty boring and bland. Then when you look on the left, that's the power of CSS and what it can do for you. So you can see how powerful CSS is and what it can do. So there are many reasons that you have to use CSS in your next website. So some of these are styling, layout and design, animations, font changes, sizing, and all sorts of stuff, organization, and of course grid systems. So I'm going to be talking just very quickly about how CSS is used. So pretty much, usually you would have a file saved in the .css file extension format, and then there is a specific tag that you can use in your HTML that we will be able to sort of link it to our page. Now, again, we are not going to be covering setting up and linking because this is WordPress and we're going to be using a CSS editor. But other than that, in the CSS file, you use selectors to select parts of the page and elements on the page and then manipulate them. We're going to be going over this in detail in just the next few slides, but I'm giving you a brief introduction here. So HTML elements are given class and IDs, which is our attributes, and these attributes can then be used to manipulate the CSS. So the CSS can manipulate the elements. So again, we're going to be talking it in the next few videos. So it typically follows the method select the element and then manipulate it. So next thing I want to cover is the CSS General Rule. So this is the rule that all CSS follows. So this is how it works. You have your selector right here. We're going to go over selectors in the next video, but just know here you would put the method of selection for the HTML element. After that, you put some curly braces. Inside these curly braces, you're going to have different properties. And this is the main part of CSS. There's many different properties: background, color, transition, font size, layout, margin, and there's a lot of different things. But you'd put the property name, a colon, and then the value you want to set it to. Again, we're going to be going over all of these different properties and values later. You just need to know how it's structured. After that, you put a semicolon. Make sure you have the semicolon. It is necessary. And you can put pretty much as many properties as you want. And that's pretty much it. It's very simple. And once you have this structured down and in your mind, everything will become so much easier. So this is followed in every single case of CSS. There are a few exceptions, but I'm not going to cover those because those are extremely advanced and they're pretty much not even CSS, but that's besides the point. So there we go. That's pretty much it. And in the next video, we're going to be talking about some of the different selectors that we can use for CSS.